Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the new rivalries I think that'll pop up through realignment. Some ones like Georgia, Texas, like Oklahoma against LSU, Oregon, Ohio State. I think some of those will become some big time rivalries over the next couple of years. But let's jump into some spring overreactions. We got into the Big 12 a little bit earlier in the week. We definitely jumped into Arizona, into Utah, Kansas State, and I believe Texas Tech was the fourth one. Now we have Oklahoma State, Kansas, Colorado, and Baylor for you today. But let's jump into Oklahoma State to start off. And every single year we fall into this trap. Flashback to last year, we were sitting here talking about Texas and OU and Kansas State, and not much about Oklahoma State. And then they went on to beat most of those teams on that list and then face Texas in Arlington before falling in the Big 12 championship. That is what they're capable of. That is what they do under Mike Gundy. They absolutely make everyone look stupid every single year. Now, in back in the present, talking about this upcoming year, I've been talking about Arizona and Utah and Kansas State and Kansas, and not so much Oklahoma State. Well, I think Mike Gundy's going to make me eat my words again. Because at the end of the day, Mike Gundy loves this. He wants to be this team. He wants to be the team that no one talks about, that lets them go off and do their business and come out and have one of the best football teams you've seen with the talent that they currently have. They'll have one of the best offensive lines in the country, returning for the number 4 returning production in the entire country. So a lot of really good things about this team. But we get a little bit infatuated with Utah coming over, and we get a little bit infatuated with Avery Johnson at quarterback for Kansas State. And frankly, I fall victim to that too. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma State just continues to prove everyone wrong every single year. And I think they could do it again this year and possibly find themselves right back in Arlington where no one expects them to be right now. But let's move on to Kansas and let's talk about Jalen Daniels. This kid is so good. And I think people have slightly forgotten that with all the injuries and things that have gone on with him. But to start 2022, this guy was the story of college football. They started 5-0. He was putting up crazy numbers, doing incredible things. At the end of that year, against Arkansas, he put up 5 touchdowns in that game. He was just an all-time performance for that little stretch, and then got injured, had some different troubles that definitely hampered that year. But as you remember, during that 5-week stretch, there were a lot of people yelling Heisman for this kid because not only was he, playing at an incredibly high level, but he was their offense. He was everything to them for quite some time during that year, and he played a huge part in what they were capable of doing throughout the year. And I think as long as you can keep him healthy, it is the sky's the limit for this kid. This kid can do anything that is on the table for any college athlete out there. So he's someone that you got to stay healthy. Obviously, that is something that is easier said than done, especially with someone that has had the history that he has had. But at the end of the day, he can do incredible things when he's on the field. And when he's on the field, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. He's one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the entire country. So I'm not saying he's going to be winning I'm not saying he's going to be winning the Heisman. I'm not saying he's going to be doing anything like crazy for Kansas this year, but let's just say Kansas puts together a really nice year, goes to the Big 12 championship, and Jalen Daniels is healthy throughout that whole thing. He's going to have some numbers that people are going to look at and say, why is this guy not in these Heisman conversations? Why is this guy not getting more love? Now, the schedule is very manageable. There's moments for him to have big-time matchups against big-time opponents at home and on the road. But at the end of the day, they have the ability to win all of those games. If they can capitalize on this moment and this kid can play to his potential, there will be people that will be talking about his Heisman. Now, some of them might be wearing Kansas Jayhawk uniforms, but at the end of the day, this kid is special and absolutely can take the world by storm this upcoming year. But let's get into Colorado, the most crazy team out there by a comfortable margin right now. And my take overall from their spring was just the outside noise is going to be too much for this team. When I look at this team this year compared to last year, from a roster perspective, it is not even close. They are light years better than they were a year ago on both lines of scrimmage. At pretty much every position, they have upgraded their talent level and their ability at those positions. That's half the battle, right? That's scraping the bottom of the barrel for, what you absolutely need to compete. Now you got to get everything else in place, and it's far from being in place to my eyes. I thought that once we got into the second year and once he had a little bit more talent and kind of had his team a little bit more, a lot of this stuff would start to kind of go away, and I was entirely wrong. I think he is leaning into it a little bit more than I would like, and obviously he has addressed this. He said he should not have gotten involved in the Twitter feud that he did get involved in, and maybe he will learn from that and continue forward, but as of right now, where we stand, I don't necessarily have a ton of confidence in him to block out that noise and not encourage it and not engage in it. So if they lose at Nebraska, or God forbid, if they lose to North Dakota State, the outside noise is going to be loud, it's going to be aggressive, and there's going to be people that want you to lose. Plain and simple. There are people in media and around college football that just don't like Dion, that just don't like Colorado, and they're going to enjoy watching you lose. Can you let that be outside your building and make everything inside your building the same? Is the biggest question mark in the world in college football right now for Colorado. If I were to ask one question about one team, it's that. Can Colorado handle all the craziness that is around their program, especially when they drop a couple? When I look at this roster, they can win 8 or 9 games. They can do incredible things. They can compete for the Big 12 in the perfect world. But I see them closer to 6 or 7 wins. I see them as a team that loses a couple early and gets overwhelmed by a couple of physical teams and then just starts to slowly fall apart at the seams. I hope that's not the case. I really want to see Colorado succeed to the level they're capable of this year, but they're just making it a lot harder on themselves than they need to. So it'll be fascinating to watch that unfold. I get more and more worried about Colorado as they get better and better from a talent perspective, which is a weird feeling, but that's where we are with Colorado right now. But then let's get into Baylor, and let's talk about Daquan Finn. This dude is going to be awesome, and you might not know the name. He came over from Toledo to be the quarterback at Baylor this upcoming year, and I think he has the ability to make an all Big 12 team. Now, that is a very tall order because in the Big 12, you have dudes at quarterback. You have Noah Fafita, Cedar Sanders, Cam Rising, Jalen Daniels, we just talked about, Avery Johnson, Garrett Green. All of those guys are really incredible and likely above on the pecking order than Daquan Finn, but they have something, or Daquan Finn has something that those guys don't, which is his team needs him, and needs him in the worst possible way. He is going to be the offense for this team alone at some points this season. He is someone that has played a ton of football, has played 5 seasons over at Toledo, had 2,600 yards passing a year ago with 22 touchdowns, had a 2.5 to 1 TD INT ratio, added 500 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground, which gives you an idea of what he can be to that offense, where when the passing game's not working quite as well, he can go create on his own and be an entire offense by himself. I think he's not going to be talked about. I think they might not win, a ton of games, but if they can put together an 8-4 season, he's going to put together a crazy number season. And I think although you have these incredible quarterbacks across the board in the Big 12, excuse me, I think you might have a tough time keeping Daquan Finn out of that conversation, because this kid is going to transform that offense and do things that are going to make your jaw drop a couple of times. But there's tons going into this Big 12 season. It is one of the most competitive conferences in the entire country. I think the most competitive of the Power 5 by a fairly comfortable margin. So it's going to be remarkable to watch this conference. We'll probably have another one of these spring overreactions on Friday, because there's a couple of teams I definitely wanted to get to before we wrap this thing up. But we're going to take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Florida State, get into a little bit of a Spotlight Wednesday, a ton riding on this year. DJ Uiagalelei has about as much pressure on him as anyone in the country. So I want to break down all of that right after this, so stick with us.